Dominus vobiscum, friends, and welcome to another episode of Donut Sunday, a podcast for lay Catholics. We have a really great and unique podcast today. It's another episode of the interview show, and today the guest on the show is my beautiful bride, my wife Maria. And it's going to be an interesting show, I think, because she's had two distinct sort of seasons of her life. Working as a professional in the dietetics world, she worked as a dietitian for a local government agency. And then after that, she's decided to stay at home to raise our young son, kind of look after the house and make sure that I don't do anything too crazy. So I really think that she offers a really unique perspective and something that might really help some people out there, especially young parents. We talk a lot about what it is to kind of raise a child, what your spiritual life looks like at that point. So I really think that you're going to enjoy it. Thanks for joining us here, and with that, we'll get the interview started. Welcome to my lovely wife, Maria.
Hello.
Thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. It's fun to be here in person.
Yeah, so that's actually a good point. You're the first guest that, due to COVID restrictions and geographical restrictions, I've actually been able to have in the studio live with me. So this is cool to be able to do this. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So we're going to be talking kind of just about, work life, faith life, family life, all of those things. And you've kind of had two sort of distinct seasons, I guess, of your life. You used to work as a dietitian. Now you're working inside the home, raising our fabulous young son. Well, I guess I should let you do a lot of the introduction. Sorry about that. Could you tell the audience and the listeners at home who you are, what you do, just kind of that general introduction?
Absolutely. Well, you know me well, so you're
That's
able
fair.
to do part of the introduction. But yes, so I am your wife, and I used to work for WIC, as you said, for about 3.5 years.
Could you just, what WIC,
Sure.
for people who might not know?
So it stands for Women, Infants, and Children. It's a government program for low and middle income families who are for kids under 5 and pregnant and postpartum mothers.
Awesome.
And so it's a nutritional program. I'm the dietitian, and just helps with other concerns that they might have too, referring them to doctors or dentists or help with housing and all kinds of things like that. So I was a dietitian there for about 3.5 years. 3 of those years I was also a manager. I was still seeing clients most of my day, but then I was also supervising other workers as well. And then 8 months ago, I stepped down from that position to be a stay-at-home mom of our baby. So like you said, I've had 2 different roles that I've been in recently.
That's awesome. Fantastic. And so I guess we have the normal set of questions that we kind of go through. So I think we'll probably divide those questions kind of in terms of the previous sort of working career, working as a dietitian, and then the sort of homemaking career, working to raise our son, kind of look after the house and make sure that I don't get too far out of line on things. So I guess something that kind of spans both of those things, but probably looks a little bit different between the two, is your spiritual life. So would you be able to kind of talk us through and kind of look at what your spiritual life looked like kind of in the previous season of your life? Mass, spiritual reading, devotions, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I would go to weekly mass, and then also just on a daily basis, I would read the readings and the reflection for the day that I would get to my email inbox. That was how I would start, with the reflection from Blessed is She. I would get my coffee and sit in the armchair and start my day that way. And then at the end of the day, I wasn't super consistent. I wish I had been more consistent, but I would try to pray the rosary either before bed or sometimes like in bed as I was falling asleep. Wouldn't always finish, but I would do that kind of as a prayer and kind of as a way to help me calm down and like focus on one thing and help me fall asleep and just kind of release everything from the day. And then another thing that I did very consistently was adoration. We met in a young adult group there, and one of their cornerstone events was going to adoration every Wednesday, and so that was really, really helpful for me. I've always been attracted to adoration, really. We had perpetual adoration at my parish growing up, and we would go, especially during Lent. My family would go, and I did have an hour of adoration that I signed up for during college at the Newman Center. So that was something that was really familiar to me and a really great chance for me to focus on prayer, I think. It's definitely important to pray, wherever you are and throughout the day, and integrate it into your work life, as I'm sure many guests talk about on this podcast. But it also really helps me to go to a sacred space and have that ability. It's just easier to focus when I'm not surrounded by things that I need to clean or need to do, my homework, my whatever. So that was a big part of my spiritual life during that season, and really helpful for me to even just kind of take a moment to rest too, because I was very busy, and it was a hard transition into being a manager, I will say, and that was a great kind of respite, that hour of adoration every week.
And having that separate space where you could really focus on it really helped, it sounds like, too.
Yeah. And I also have always really liked journaling, prayer journaling. I think writing out my prayers, or just kind of talking to God, kind of like you would in a diary, but as a prayer, actually directing it to Him, helps me focus too, because if I just try to pray kind of free form, I think my mind kind of starts wandering. But when I write, it forces me to think about it a little bit more, and I think it slows it down a little bit too, or helps me focus somehow that way. So I would journal during adoration a lot.
Sure. And I think that journaling has helped me in the past too, because it's like, I don't know, when you have this sort of, it's almost like having a tangible record of things that you were praying about, things that were on the forefront of your mind, things that certain people had asked you to pray for. And it's just kind of a good reminder, and kind of almost like watching yourself develop in a certain way, like watching as your prayer life changes from, 1 year to the next, or even 1 month to the next, just to have that record, which I think is awesome.
And it's amazing. I've paged back through my prayer journals periodically, and it's amazing sometimes to remember what I was praying for, and then to be like, wow, that actually happened. Like, that's amazing, to be able to see answered prayers that you don't even necessarily remember that you were praying. It's a nice reminder of God's goodness too.
For sure. That's awesome. And then I guess sticking to that sort of previous season of your life too, what do you think that your faith life contributed to your work and your family life?
I think that I really saw my work as a form of service too, and like particularly because I was working with families and who were in a difficult situation, perhaps. And it's not always single mothers. People think of WIC as being for moms, but it's for entire families, or a dad raising a child too. But a lot of the time it might be a mom who perhaps was considering an abortion, or maybe other people would think that she maybe should consider that, and she's chosen to raise the child, and maybe is in difficult circumstances, and WIC can be a help in that situation, and kind of help her set up a stable home for this child. So I really saw it as a way to be pro-life, not only in word and and maybe going to a March for Life, or kind of advocating for pro-life policies, but to say, hey, this is a way that we can really practically help after the child is born too, and help set them up for success and a good life after the baby's born too.
For sure. And I think there was something that I kind of learned from you, because I think a lot of people, I was like a lot of people who had kind of this very limited understanding of WIC, thinking that it was kind of like, you know, coupons or food stamps, and it's not that necessarily. Like, you guys provide financial assistance, but you provide a lot of advice and sort of nutritional counseling as well to kind of help people on the right path in terms of their habits as well.
Yeah, it's become a lot more holistic. I mean, when it started, it was very limited and very much just the coupons and just about formula. And, you know, this was in the 70s that it started, and now, you know, 50 years later, it's that's crazy. It's become a lot more holistic. Yeah, there's a lot more focus on not only like a lot of physical health, like you say, nutrition, and, you know, making sure they're getting to the doctor and they understand how to even find a doctor and things like that. But also, you know, making sure they have housing, making sure they have a crib, you know, or maybe they need a mental health referral, and like helping them, you know, kind of come to that, empower them to do that, you know. So it's really trying to, be holistic in that approach, for sure.
Fantastic. And then, was there anything else that you felt like your faith life contributed to work and family?
Well, I guess I did, when I was thinking about that too, it did make me think of just kind of how I fit things in as far as prayer throughout the day. I was never able to remember to dedicate an hour each hour because things are so busy. So what I did was I made a reminder for myself in my Outlook. And so it would pop up every hour, and it would be like, oh yeah, okay. So I would try to dedicate each hour of work for some intention. And then just made like, on my desktop, I would have either like maybe an Advent wreath that I would change at each week so that it had 1, 2, 3, 4 candles, or some kind of religious image. Or I really like the prayer by Teresa of Avila, that's about, now I'm not going to be able to bring it to mind right off the top of my head, but don't let anything, you know, trouble you, and with patience everything is attained. I have it in my head in Spanish right now.
Oh. That's all good.
It's a beautiful prayer, so I had that on my desktop background too.
Awesome.
And then as far as family life during that period, a lot of it was when I was single or when we were dating and engaged. And so, you know, I think my faith life was very important in that process too, because I've known for a very long time that I was called to marriage and being a mother, and that was something I really, really wanted. And it was, you know, difficult to feel like, well, where is this? You know, God, like, why did you give me this incredible conviction about this and then not give me the opportunity to live it out?
Means.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was definitely a journey of kind of learning to trust God and his timing. And, you know, because I definitely went through many years of kind of grasping for it a little bit, I think, or kind of worrying like, well, you know, is this it? Is this it? Like, when is it coming? Can I, you know, and it was really important for me to learn, you know, pray about that and kind of learn to trust God. And that gave me a lot more peace when I finally was able to say, you know what, I don't think that this is the direction that I'm supposed to be going. And I don't know what direction I am supposed to be going, but I know it's not this one, so I'm just going to let it go and we'll see what happens. And that was only attained through prayer, that kind of release of that. So that was very important, and I'm sure something that's in my prayer journal from Adoration.
For sure. That's fantastic. Yeah. And I mean, I think we can kind of circle back on both of those questions actually now in your current sort of season of life, so to speak. So now, you know, life has changed quite a bit. There's a young one who's, you know, almost kind of running around. I mean, it'll be a little while before that.
Rolling around.
Rolling around, yeah. Rolling around and making sounds and stuff and giggling and everything. So what does your spiritual life look like now? I mean, certainly COVID has had an effect on that.
Right. Yeah, there's been a couple of big changes recently.
Absolutely. So if you don't mind speaking to that a little bit too.
Yeah. So we still go to weekly mass, and during the time when there wasn't public masses, we made it our habit to watch it online. And I still get the readings to my email every day. I have to say it's harder to focus on them because my brain's kind of pulled in many different directions, and I don't always have as much time in the morning as I planned. Sometimes he wakes up earlier than we think, and
I found that too.
Yeah. So something that I just started doing in the last couple of days was reading the readings to him, which I found helps me focus on them a lot better because I'm slowing down when you have to read it aloud, and that helps me think about them and retain them. And if you asked me what they were about like 4 hours later, I might even be able to remember them, which is a good sign. And I guess backing up a little bit too, when he was first born, like it was really, really hard to focus. And I had a lot of trouble praying. Like when we didn't have public mass, we still had the church building open where we were living, and we went a few times with him and when he was really little, and we were very sleep deprived, and it was like I couldn't even form more than like 2 coherent sentences. Like I was so tired, and also just so my brain was just all over the place trying to come to terms with having a little baby, and this was our first, so it was just a total change. So it was such a struggle to pray, really. And
it's almost as if having a child is overwhelming.
For a little bit. For a little bit. And God knows that. And that really gave me comfort to be like, you know what, God, like, even if all I can do right now is pray like this one sentence, like I was just, it was like all I could come back to was maybe, please keep our family healthy. And like, that's all I've got. And like, I can't come up with anything else. And then I start thinking about something else or just zoning out because I'm so tired. And then I come back to, okay, please keep our family healthy. And that's like such a short, not flowery prayer. But that was what I had. And I knew like, this is what I have, God, like, this is what I'm giving you. And to just give, if there are any young parents listening to this too, or anyone else in a similar situation, like cut yourself some slack there. Like God knows what we're capable of, and that was really comforting to me to just know like this is all I can do. In the future I need to keep improving and working on it and striving to be able to pray in different ways and better maybe, but that was all I had at the time. And circling back to Adoration too, our parish has Adoration now, and I've subbed. I can't commit to an hour of Adoration right now, but I can substitute for people here and there. And that's been a really, really, really helpful for me because, now that he's a little older, I can pray a little bit better at home, but it's pretty much in little snatches. And when I go to Adoration again, it's like that sacred space of like, okay, Jim's got the baby, or grandparents have the baby, I have this hour, I'm just going to focus on this. And that has been, I can't do that every week or every day, certainly, but if it's like, okay, maybe once a month I can do this and have that really focused kind of check-in, which I guess you do with friends, and, too, is like, maybe you can't talk to your friend for an hour every day, and maybe you have a season where you can't talk to them as much, but you still, if you check in on a consistent basis and have a solid conversation as much as you can, you still keep that relationship going. So
for sure,
that's kind of where I'm at now. Short little bits, but it works.
Oh yeah, and I mean, what you were talking about with just the little prayer where it's like, please help me keep my family safe and healthy. Like there's really a beauty in that simplicity, I think, because I mean, Jesus calls us to be childlike, and in a certain sense it's like an admission of like, you know, I can't do this by myself. Like, this is all I've got right now, and I need your grace to provide. So, I mean, there's something really beautiful in that, I think. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I guess kind of rolling along on that, too, how do you feel like your faith life contributes to your work now, you know, raising our son, kind of looking after the house, making sure that everything is, like I said, like I'm staying in line for the most part. So both that as well as, you know, family life just at home.
I would say the biggest thing for me right now is I've always felt close to Mary. I mean, she's my patron saint, of course, being Maria. And I've always felt close to her, but now being a mother and raising a baby, I definitely go to her for help. And I know something we've talked about was like, man, when he sometimes exasperates me, especially when he was littler and was crying even more than he does now. And you're just like, I don't know what to do. And so tired and frustrated. It struck me one day, like, well, Jesus probably did this too. Like, Mary knows what this is like, because he's not sinning by doing this. You know, even if you're frustrated with him, he's not doing this on purpose. This is just what babies do. So I don't know exactly the theology of this, but I would imagine that baby Jesus also did these things because he was a human, and this is what human babies do. So just like calling out to Mary in those moments of, you know, you handled this without sinning, so please help me handle this without sinning. You know, give me patience, and also kind of, you know, give me patience, and also kind of help me again cut myself some slack. And like, there's a certain amount of exasperation that's just normal, I think, for a parent to feel. You know, it's not a sin to be exasperated. Like, you have to be conscious of what you do with it, and I guess to what degree, but like, just because you're frustrated, like, that's only normal if your child's been crying for an hour. So it's okay. You know, don't beat yourself up about that. So asking her to help me kind of see where that line is too.
For sure. Yeah, that's awesome. And then kind of rolling along there, is there anything about, you know, life, raising our child, you know, being at home, just the general situation that we find ourselves in, is there anything that makes living the faith difficult, do you think? I mean, do you think? I mean, of course, I'm sorry, that was dumb.
Which ones?
But yeah, exactly. But I guess if you could kind of clean up my messy statement there, and just if there's something that comes to mind in particular.
Well, definitely the lack of time and ability to focus that I've mentioned, you know, so cutting myself slack there, but also seeking out those opportunities where I can really focus on prayer is helpful. And I mean, certainly the current situation, which is my least favorite phrase now, you know, it's put a new importance to me on reaching out to other people. And like, I've always been, I think maybe a charism of mine is kind of hospitality, and like keeping in touch with people, kind of checking in with people.
You are probably the single greatest person that I've ever known at doing that. So yes, I would definitely say so.
And I have a system that enables me to do that. You know, I have little reminders of myself to I need to check in with so and so. But that is really important to me to keep that connection going. You know, even as I moved around. So I had practice with that. So that was nice when COVID hit and we couldn't meet up with people in person, to just continue to text people and, you know, set up video chats and things. And I think just that even better than texting is video chatting and calling on the phone. And this has really shown me the importance of that. And, as things develop, kind of having people over too. And it's so refreshing to be with people in person and making that effort to reach out to people and welcome them to our yard or whatever it is. Is really important, I think, and a way to kind of evangelize in a low-key way too, of being like, hey, we're Catholic, also we're nice and we are welcoming and we're fun to hang out with. So and we seem pretty happy, right? Like we're living out our faith and our family is wholesome and happy. There's something good going on here. I hope that people see that too.
Hospitality is definitely a Dominican trait as well, not Dominican, Benedictine. I'm a fan of both of those orders, but just to be able to kind of invite people in and to have them sort of experience just to live life with you, I think is something that is really kind of tragically not a thing that we do very well. I think, especially among our peers and everything, it's very easy to be flaky. Which is really unfortunate, I think.
Yeah. And relying on either, potentially, going out to a bar and that's all you do, or even just like, if you texting is good for sure. It's better than not being in touch. But if that's where it stops, it's not as life-giving.
I would tend to agree with that for sure. I guess it might be interesting to some listeners to hear about your system that makes things work so well.
If anyone wants to steal it.
Yeah, do you mind?
Hopefully no one who I check in with is offended to know that it's because I have a Post-it note with your name on it that I remember to text you. But that's how I do it, is I have my planner and I have little Post-it note markers in there, and probably every week I try to check in with maybe 2 people, however many is doable. And then when I talk to a person, then I move their sticky note maybe a month or 2 months down the road in my planner. And then when we flip over to that page, it's like, oh yeah, I haven't talked to so-and-so in a while. I should reach out and set up a video call. So yeah, little Post-it notes are powerful. Write it down. If you don't write it down, you will forget.
Yeah. And I mean...
And it's amazing. I mean, when I flip over and I see that person's name, it's like, there's no way it's been 2 months since we talked. And then I look and it has been. So if I wasn't doing that, I don't know how long would pass.
It's exactly why I think the system is so effective, because it seems like year after year, it's always like, oh man, it's almost Christmas already. And it's like, Christmas is always December 25th. Like, we should be used to this by now. It's been that way every year for the past, couple thousand years. Like, it's always December 25th. We shouldn't be surprised by that.
Takes you by surprise every time.
So that system is awesome, and I've seen it work.
Tried and true.
Yeah, it's excellent. So I guess moving on from that then, what kind of hobbies, sort of leisure activities do you like to take part in? And kind of how do you see those work into the other facets of your life, faith life, work life, family life?
I set up video chats with my friends.
There you go. That's definitely one right off the bat.
Otherwise, I would say reading has always been something that I really enjoy.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction, for sure. You are a nonfiction. I am a fiction, yeah.
I have the nonfiction shelf. You have the fiction shelf. So it works out.
And I like mystery stories. I grew up reading Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, and I more recently have gotten into I always want to say Margaret Peterson Haddix. That's not her name. Mary Higgins Clark.
Yes.
Is a mystery thriller author, and it's not. I wouldn't recommend it to like a junior high student, I guess, because they are, you know, thrillers. But
Mm-hmm.
but I do appreciate that she's Catholic and a lot of her characters are Catholic, and she just it'll be like, you know, after mass so and so did this, and it's just a very like their Catholic life is just kind of threaded in. There's a lot of priest characters too who are just
Mm-hmm.
priests being good men and supporting their parishioners, so that's cool.
That's cool.
So those are some of the books that I read. And then as a dietitian, I like food. I like trying different restaurants and different foods, and I also really like cooking and baking. And so that was something that I did. I left my job at WIC while I was still expecting our son, and then COVID hit, and so then I was at home with very much nothing to do because I didn't have work and I couldn't go out and volunteer or just go to a coffee shop or anything. So I did a lot of trying new recipes, which was really a fun way to spend that time. I was able to bake and cook quite a few things.
If any of the listeners are curious, I was definitely the beneficiary of a lot of that cooking as well. So that was very fun to see you trying new recipes, having fun with it. And I mean, from my perspective, eating it was pretty fun too.
I'm glad.
That was good. Yeah, and I think that kind of ties in with what you said too with hospitality. I think that there's a certain level of, you know, just making, you know, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but to be able to sit down for a simple meal with a couple of friends, you know, something that you've made for other people, you know, like I said, even if it's just like brownies out of a box or something like that, I think it's such a cool way in today's world because I think we just live so much of our lives through the screen, you know, through social media. And it's
Absolutely.
like, there's something about just sharing, you know, even if it's just a glass of lemonade on the deck or something like that, just being with people and sharing in something. It's a really awesome thing. And I guess beyond that, I really only have one additional question for the interview. What do you think the biggest challenges, maybe one or two, are for lay Catholics that are facing lay Catholics today?
I think one of the biggest things, and we're definitely seeing this we're recording this kind of leading up to the election of 2020, and just with social media, speaking of social media, I think one of the biggest challenges is feeling comfortable and like bold enough to like even just acknowledge that you're Catholic. Even beyond, I mean, certainly it's challenging to stand up on particular issues, but even just saying that you're Catholic as that simple statement is it can be scary, which is really sad that there's that much pushback against that, and all these assumptions that go along with it. And definitely I'm thinking of the quote of, you know, there's only a few people that are, you probably know it word for word, but there's, you know, there's maybe only a few people that actually hate the Catholic Church, but all kinds of people hate what they think the Catholic Church is. So just that simple acknowledgement of your Catholicism, I think, is a challenge. But if we do it, I think that there's a real potential to help dispel those myths. I think it's really important to be, you know, a person of integrity and really live out your faith, because if people know that you're Catholic, but you're the biggest gossip in your office, like that's not helping anything, because or whatever it is, you know, you have to really try to live a Christian life. But when you do that, I think that, you know, it's my hope. I'm really a big believer in the small things have a big impact when you add them all up. Like if I am just quietly perhaps living my Catholic faith, like I just really hope that people see that brings me joy and peace and are attracted to that. And even if I don't know the impact that I have, you know, I hope that opens the door for them to be more open to Catholicism years later, or even maybe they never convert, but they have a better relationship with God, and maybe on their deathbed they are, more open to Him or something, even if it's not something that we know, just the kindness that we bring, the integrity, the generosity that we bring to our interactions at work or anywhere can be really powerful, I think. And I was thinking, as I'm talking about this, of, in my work, people knew I was Catholic and I didn't make a big deal about it, but I would just say, what did you do this weekend? Well, my boyfriend and I went to Mass, and then we went to, this restaurant afterwards or whatever. And I remember one time when we were engaged, my coworkers had been asking, because I lived half an hour from work and you lived 15 minutes from work. And so I was always driving all over the place. And I just said, I went and had dinner with you and went home or whatever. I didn't make a big deal about the fact that I was going home every night, even though it certainly would have been convenient to be staying at your apartment. But they knew that. And at one point, a couple of my coworkers actually, they were asking too about whether I was going to move once we were engaged. And I just said, no, we're going to, I'll move once, after August when we get married. Yeah. And they said, you're doing things the right way. Like, we didn't do that. And it's really good. It's really nice to see you and like your love story kind of unfolding the right way, which was really cool. We don't always get that feedback.
True.
But they both had, gone a different path in their lives, and can see, looking back, maybe how that didn't work out. And so it was just really neat to hear that they noticed that and saw it as a good thing. And so hopefully there are other people too who are seeing that, and maybe they don't comment to you that they're noticing the way you live, but it is powerful to be witnessing just simply like that, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think about, like, when you were talking about being sort of a witness and being, like, willing to put it out there that you're Catholic, and it's like, man, that seems kind of dangerous in today's world. But I also think of, like, the people in the early centuries, like St. Ignatius of Antioch, he goes into the Colosseum and gets eaten by lions. And, his response is like, well, if I'm to be, crushed like wheat in the mill to be made into this, made into bread, food for other Christians, like, so be it with my martyrdom. It's like, you hear these crazy stories about people being, hacked to pieces or something, not to be morbid, but it's like, and we're afraid to, like, make the sign of the cross and pray over our meal in a restaurant. Yeah. And it's like, that was something that it was probably during college that whenever my parents and I, my immediate family would go out to a restaurant, I always made it a point to pray publicly, because it's like, I really don't think that I'm going to get, thrown to tigers in the middle of this restaurant.
Yeah.
Like, it's not to be worried about that and to be so overly concerned about some phantom opponent who's going to come, take me off to the rack to be crushed or something like that. Like, I don't believe it.
Right.
And I think that there's a certain amount of courage that I think we're lacking when we do that.
Yeah, it does put it in perspective when you think about that what are we going to lose? Maybe a little popularity. But honestly, even, I think a lot of the times, if you do make the sign of the cross at a restaurant or at work, or, you find out nothing happens. Like, it's fine. Or even when our son was born, we were one of the nurses asked, how did you choose the name? And we said, oh, it's a favorite saint.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, I'm Catholic too. What parish do you go to?
Mm-hmm.
And that happened twice. There were two nurses who were Catholic, and just from that conversation about his name, we find that out. But you wouldn't know that unless you talked about that, or,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you make the sign of the cross. People, there's probably a lot more of us out there than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, maybe you'll lose a Facebook friend, but maybe you'll find out, like, oh, 4 other people in the room, in the lunchroom right now, are also Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? So
Certainly.
you have to, take that step and be courageous enough to do something like that.
Yeah. Bishop Robert Barron has mentioned before, and he's echoing the church fathers who would talk about scattering and finding seeds of the word in the world. So, like, finding these tiny little points of connection and kind of opening those up and bringing those into focus, I think. So I think it's little things like that for sure, and at least something that I've found too, and you were talking about this when you were talking about the experience with some of your coworkers, is I found that talking about virtue, not in like a preachy way, but just to speak well of things like fatherhood and motherhood, to speak well of things like your spouse,
Yeah.
not to speak poorly of them, but to really hold them up and say, not in a haughty way, but to say, like, we had this really great time. My wife was great. She, did this thing the other night, and this is what we did together. Or to talk about, like, this was, a story that I heard from a newspaper clipping about somebody who behaved, very courageously in the face of some sort of moral quagmire that they found themselves in. I think that just little things like that are where we can find those seeds of the word in our everyday interactions. And definitely, like you said, not in a preachy way, just, we're not going to move in together until we're going to move in together after we're married.
Yeah. And that's where it stops.
Right. It doesn't have to go any
Right.
further, because I think the point, it's not an overly combative point, but it's a point that stands on its own.
And people are attracted to truth, beauty, and goodness, right? That's just a human thing. And so even if you're not saying it in an explicitly Catholic or Christian way, I think people at their core are attracted to that.
Right. 100%. And I think that that's a great way to end the interview. It's kind of an uplifting note to be able to find little seeds of the word here and there, and little kernels of truth and beauty and goodness. So again, thanks for joining me here, lovely wife.
Hey, my pleasure.